Okay, well, good morning. I was mentioned I was going to tell my Concave-Earth story. So, way back in my teens, I used to skip a lot of school actually, and I'd go into town, into Newcastle, and scour the second-hand bookstores and spend all my pocket money buying a pile of second-hand books. I'd basically buy them according to my budget, and I mostly looked for esoteric, weird stuff, you name it, all sorts of unusual things, religious things, even. I was quite into Buddhism and stuff. And one book I particularly, and I was also interested in UFOs and you name it. Often I just buy things more so I had the knowledge of what I'm up against as opposed to because I want to believe it or I want to use the knowledge. You know what I mean? I just wanted to understand stuff. And this one book I bought called Secret of the Ages had a picture of a UFO coming up out of the ocean on the cover of it. And I thought, oh, that'd be interesting. Secret of the Ages, yeah. Turned out to be a Hollow Earth book and had some very compelling arguments. It had evidence from all around the world. It was written by a guy called Brinsley Trench, so obviously a French guy. And he fully believed the Earth was a globe. And his theory was that it's hollow and that UFOs and aliens and so forth live in underground cities, that it's, there's thriving cultures down there, maybe ancient cultures. But his theory was that some of the entrances and exits included the North Pole, because he had a satellite picture of what just looked like a massive hole at the North Pole. There's entrances in Antarctica, and there's caverns and stuff in various places around the world, but most of them actually come from under the ocean, which, that was his theory. One chapter, however, chapter 9, was about the Tamarack mine mysteries. Now, you won't find much about the Tamarack mine mysteries online. There's a little bit, but I'll just rattle off what I do know. It was done by geodetic scientists in the late 1800s, early 1900s, basically wanting to figure out a better formula for working out the circumference of the spinning space ball they believe they live on. The age-old method, and still the method used today, is the Eratosthenes method, which is to measure two places at a known distance apart and measure the angle of the shadows of the sun at the same time. And from that, you can get a formula which is pretty accurate to within 3%, so it's said. Although, because the Earth is on an elliptical path around the sun, according to heliocentrism, sometimes we're 93 million miles away, sometimes we're 96 million miles. They say that's insignificant. You can consider the sun to be an infinite distance away to get your results. So that's still the method used today. I checked. So this is what the modern globers actually believe. So these guys figured, well, another way to do it would be to erect two very high poles perpendicular to Earth's surface, measure the distance apart at the bottom to the distance apart at the top. However, to do that over such a great distance becomes virtually impossible. It's, if it's only 8 inches in 1 mile, and believe me, they've tried doing this over 6 miles or more and found zero curvature. So that method failed. But what they thought would also be possible, because they had some very deep mine shafts in certain places, is to suspend very long plumb bobs down them, ensuring that all motion and wind currents and magnetic forces and everything is taken into consideration. Measure the distance apart at the bottom, where they should be slightly closer towards the center of gravity, and compared to the distance apart at the top, you'd be able to work out a formula for the size of the Earth. It makes logical sense. What they discovered, however, every single time, is the lines diverged at the bottom. They got further apart. Now, they were mystified by this because it made no sense. They should be getting closer together. So they figured, well, is it gravity from the sides of the walls? Well, how could it be not pulling both of them in the same direction? There's not that much difference in the gravity and the distance between the plumb bobs from one another. Why wouldn't all pull in one direction? Why wouldn't the spin push it all in one direction instead of make them both spread apart from one another, no matter what direction they were at? Eventually, they settled upon two mines in the place called Tamarack, which gives it the name, the Tamarack Mine Mysteries. These places, two mine shafts, a mile deep and 1 mile apart at the level surface. So these were geodetic scientists. They were doing extremely accurate measures. They're not just doing a bit of guesswork with, your sewing tape measure or anything. These were serious scientists out in the field doing serious business. So they eventually found two mine shafts, a mile apart, a mile deep, joined together with a horizontal shaft. And long story short, they discovered that at the bottom it was 1 mile 8 inches apart, when it's 1 mile at the top, when that's the exact opposite of the curvature formula expected for the globe Earth. So that's where I began my journey, thinking, hang on a second, if the center of gravity is like 44,000 miles out the other side of Earth in any direction, and planes don't, the atmosphere moves with the Earth, so we're told. Planes fly higher, get there faster. What if we lived on the inside of the Earth? What if we're the ones on the inside and these aliens are coming from the outside? Now that started to make a bit more sense to me. And so I worked on that formula for many years. Just in the back of my head. I'd talk to my friends around the campfire one time, blow their mind, saying, when we boil the billy, the billy is a tin can with a white handle through it. You make billy tea. You boil the billy, you lift it up out of the fireplace and tap it with a stick 3 times, because that knocks off any coals off the bottom. And then you start spinning it around and around. The bucket of water trick that you spin, so that when the water's completely upside down, this is boiling water, mind you, it doesn't fall down and scald you, because centripetal force holds it in the bucket, in the billy. And the reason, if you didn't hit it with the stick 3 times, well, all those little pieces of coal and ash on the bottom could go flying off and cause a bushfire. So it's very important to do that little step. So that's how centripetal force works. So on the outside of a ball, that's like the bottom surface of the billy can. Things would get flung off. So obviously on the globe, we've got all this gravity, and the force is so tiny because we're only going 0.00694 RPM. So they've got all the stories covering the basis why we don't go flying off the Earth. So that's fine. However, if you're on the inside, then gravity is actually the centripetal force, which is pushing the tea leaves to the bottom of the billy can, is pushing them outwards, down and outwards, or upwards. There's no sort of up and down in space, whichever way you look at it. So water would always seek its level inside of the concave Earth, and everything would be naturally pushed outwards, and that could explain gravity. So I thought, wow, science doesn't know what gravity is. I've worked out what gravity is. One explanation for it anyway. So that was my concave Earth proposal. And then so people say, well, what about the stars? I said, well, they could just be holograms. It could be way smaller than they actually look. It could be in the inside of the Earth, and it's all projections, holographic projections, and all these galaxies are actually really, really tiny. It's a possibility. You can come up with any sort of explanation for things that you don't know. You can create a theory. So, but my problem was sunsets, the horizon. And if you're on the inside of something, the horizon would technically just keep on going up and up and up. So you'd see nothing but a wall of water. However, I spent years surfing and playing around the ocean and climbing headlands, looking out to sea, staring out to the horizon. I had a really great experience in beautiful locations. So I've been very blessed as far as that's concerned. Where I grew up, there's a tidal river, there's a big port, a big bay, Port Stephens, massive headlands, islands out to the coast. The river goes all the way up to the Great Lakes, the Mile Lakes. The first one is brackish, semi-tidal. The top one is freshwater and not so tidal, not tidal at all, really. They're not Great Lakes like the Great Lakes between Canada and the US. They're tiny ponds in comparison, really, and they're quite shallow. But they're still reasonable bodies of water. And it's all national park, beautiful area. Heaps of wild dogs, dingoes, and you name it. So, heaps of koalas too. Just to walk down the main street, people would walk up sometimes. One of my friends did, and picked up a baby off the back of one of these koalas walking down the street. Of course, put it back, but that's the sort of place I grew up in. So I was very lucky and had lots of experience with water. And when Flat Earth came along, I first thought it was the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like my father-in-law, he was a merchant sea captain. He's always telling me awesome stories about traveling around the world, going through the various canals. Told me about the Panama Canal, and they go up in those locks and how exciting it is and narrow, and told me about the Suez Canal. But when he retired, he confessed to me one morning, we're just sitting around having coffee one Sunday morning when we're visiting them, and he says he genuinely believes the Earth is flat. And I thought he'd lost his mind. I honestly did. I couldn't shut up about it. I'm all the way home talking to the ex-wife saying, he's lost his mind. He thinks the Earth's flat. What about all the water? Wouldn't it all fall off? All I could picture was the water rushing off. And, I basically put it out of my mind for about 10 years. And then Flat Earth started becoming popular. Some of my friends were talking about it, some online friends, who I considered very intelligent. They were down to earth, really onto stuff. And so I thought, this is nonsense, man. I'm going to disprove this, tonight. I'll prove the globe. And so subsequently I became a flat earther. And the biggest thing that did it for me is the horizon and perspective and the sunset, because the sunset on a globe would set completely differently. It would go down exponentially fast at the very last moment. Um, you'd sort of see it do a curving drop at the last bit. It wouldn't look anything like it does. The horizon never casts a shadow after the sun goes behind it, but anything else the sun goes behind casts a distinct shadow. And the flat level horizon that always rose to eye level, no matter how high you got. And so because we had these digital cameras now, high altitude balloon footage, we could see that it keeps extending out forever. The concave Earth, the horizon would just, you'd see it, a big wall of water ramping up. The sun wouldn't set, it would get smaller and smaller and either start going back up again or have to be hidden by something, but it wouldn't really set. It's going back up as it goes into the distance inside the concave Earth. The only thing that made sense is the flat and stationary Earth, and high altitude balloon footage is the biggest game changer for that. So that's a bit of my background on how I became a flat earther, my concave Earth beginnings, and how I've thought everything through. I've tested everything. I've seen for myself, like Julian Rocks at Byron Bay is my go-to place. Ngutungli is the Aboriginal name for it, and it means the father of creation. So go figure that. I only found that out recently. I've always been calling it Julian Rocks and didn't know the legend behind it. But that's my go-to place to prove the Earth is flat. When you're standing at the beach, the whole rocky outcrop appears to be entirely above the horizon. You walk up to the lighthouse at Cape Byron and you look again and you can see it's surrounded by miles upon miles and miles of flat and level water. So there's no way that the horizon could be caused by curvature, as the globers like to believe. It's not much bigger than we think because we know the dimensions of a 25,000 mile circumference sphere. It has to have 8 inches of drop per mile squared. So after just 3 miles, that's when it's 6 feet of drop, which is why the horizon is 3 miles away, because that's based on perspective of how we see. It's not actually curvature, which you can tell by getting higher and higher and seeing for yourself. The horizon goes forever and ever. The Earth is flat and stationary, and that is that. I'm Iron Horse. Have a good one.